Okay, we are live and ready when you are, Madam Chair.
There's no light. Oh, it's on up here. Okay. I'll bring this meeting of the Commercial Business Business District Subcommittee to order. We need to do roll call.
I don't think you were in. I didn't turn my own mic on. Let's do that again. All right, for this January 17th work session of the Commercial Business District Subcommittee, in attendance in the room, we have Vice Chair Patrick, Allison Ryan, Don Bodyfelt, Walt Martin, Leslie Martin, Ecolia Collier. Online, we have Randy Sweet, and staff in attendance is City Manager Gagel and myself, Clerk Diamond.
Where are we going to start with?
So my thought going into this work session was we've gathered through all of the definitions, the land use table that we went down through, and that's included in the packet. And then I put together a table of the definitions that we were going to kind of discuss and work on. They're divided into two categories. One is kind of the occupancy with residential and accessory use. And this is all in the memo on page 3 of the packet. And the second being kind of business definitions, business types, kind of just as a way to split those out. So in that table or on page 4, you'll see that there was a list of codes, which we can bring up and go through. Different examples of municipal codes from the city of Soldotna, municipality of Anchorage, the city of Kenai, and some resources there, including the International Building Code. And then starting on page 5, you'll see that I have this table with our Soldovia Municipal Code on the left-hand side. And then I don't have everything in the spots for code examples, but some of them for the structure, for the stuff that we're going to start with, which I thought would be the accessory structure, accessory use, dwelling units, and hotel, motel, lodge, nightly rentals kind of jump into that discussion to start out with. So on the right-hand side of that table, you'll see that I put in some examples from those codes, mostly from the Soldotna and the Seward codes, which I found very useful and very helpful. The Kenai Peninsula Borough does not really have zoning, so there was no real codes from them. Our definitions are fairly similar to the city of Kenai. So we didn't have too much to pull from them, but so I just kind of put in the ones here in this table that I thought might be good starting points for the discussion for each of those topics. But I guess I'm going to open it up to you to see if there's any other way that somebody else would like to proceed.
Do things differently, or do you want to just go through it?
Right into that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any reason not to.
Yeah, and then so I did with all of our notes from the last meeting on where are we at? Page 14 starts kind of that whole, just to refresh all of our memories. The land use tables, the ones that we want to discuss in the comments. So don't know if everybody's had the chance to refresh their brains or on that yet. And I can pull that up on the screen as well. But
So how do we want to, where do we want to start? Like, just go through the table.
Yep, we could go through the table and start with that. If anybody,
And then work back and forth with these codes. Does that sound with everybody? I've never done anything like this before, so I don't know, seems like a good place for me. Or
If it helps, this is new for us as well. And I did want to point out one thing in the memo, if you guys don't mind. We are not the only ones in this position. I had a really great meeting at the beginning of December with the Alaska Municipal League and other communities throughout the state. There was some emphasis. There was a few concurrent work sessions with state officials and the Alaska Housing Authority that directly correlated back to, one was actually directly related, well, to building permits. The first one from the Alaska Housing Authority said that they're currently working on like a template, a code template to help municipalities follow in the future, not the code itself, but just kind of an overall draft of what a code should contain and look like. So I think that's still a little ways out, but it was refreshing to hear that we may not have all the answers right away, and that there are a lot of communities that are also in the same situation working through their codes. So I hope that helps alleviate if there's any thoughts or feelings on that. But it was nice at least for me to hear that this is going on elsewhere.
Okay, so let's start on page 14, I guess. Right? So here it says residential land use types. And remove headings was like throughout the document, right? That was a plan. Include occupied, okay, so accessory structure on an unoccupied lot. Discuss, include occupied in definition. So occupied, unoccupied was what we wanted to,
Yeah, so
occupied / unoccupied.
what I found was that there's many difference for an accessory dwelling unit versus an accessory structure. And so if you jump back to page 6 going on 7, on page 6 there'll be the definition that we currently have in code for accessory structure. And then if you follow page 7, I highlighted the part under C. It says accessory structures are not permitted as living quarters. So if we want to consider them as occupied structures in that sense, one of the suggestions throughout the code was to add an additional accessory dwelling unit, which is not currently in code. And so keep the accessory structures for non-living and occupied use. So that was just a suggestion that's in a lot of other codes.
Do we currently have anything in our, I don't even know, our land use that would, like if I had a building, let's say, for example, my building here, and we have an accessory structure in back, if we converted it into a living quarter, do we have anything here that would fall under its definition?
Great question. So right now that would just be considered residential.
Right.
But in one of the other discussions, not to keep going back to AML, but it was very enlightening. We had an affordable housing discussion with a panel from many municipalities across the state. Juneau, Anchorage, Sitka, some smaller ones, and then a couple of other nonprofit organizations. And they very heavily discussed ADUs and their importance moving forward in the future. So if that's something that this committee is interested in implementing, having a definition like that, there are examples that we can pull from as put here. As mentioned, this is from Soldotna, their example, and maybe that alleviates some of the confusion that there's been around of what an accessory is, or accessory unit, or accessory dwelling.
Sure. Part of the things.
Turn on your mic, Don.
Yeah,
You're good.
it's I think one of the things we were trying to eliminate is too many definitions for different things.
Mhm.
And so, in my opinion, an accessory structure is something completely different than something that you would occupy. And in a lot of cases, I think just the sheer size of a lot and the building codes that go along with that is what tends to regulate how much and what you can do there, rather than adding another layer of definitions for something else. I think that for sure we can come up with something that covers that without coming up with a whole new definition.
Fair enough point. I mean, right now it's just residential and a residence is a residence, no matter what structure it's in, if it meets that criteria. So I guess it's maybe evaluation of is it needed to have a definition for a residence or a living quarters that is accessory.
Because in order to make her, I mean, like if she's talking about if she was to go in and make that a living quarters, then you have to add sewer and you know, you have to plumb it in. It's got to have water and sewer, right? And then so that changes it, like you say. into
Parking
residential.
spaces.
Yeah. Makes it a totally different structure than an accessory.
And that's an even deeper topic there because currently in city code, sorry, that's an even deeper topic there because currently in Title 13, in order to occupy a space, whether it be a business or commercial residential, to have some occupancy in it, it's required to have water and sewer.
Yeah, and again, that was just, there was some confusion on whether accessory structures were places that people lived in, so I thought it might be valuable to separate those two out as an accessory structure and not, but it might not be needed.
I got a question. Is there any limit to the number of structures on a lot that makes it so that we need to specify accessory? I mean, can you have 3 or 4 different, as long as they all fit and have the base coverage?
Yes, so, and according to code, there are lot coverage. Some districts have, some do not. Some with the smaller lots don't have the same lot coverage requirements as others, like, industrial. And I believe waterfront commercial residential can utilize their whole lot space. But let me double check on those. There are a few, but some like the residential lots do have lot coverage requirements, which means they could put as many structures in it as long as there was enough open space, natural vegetation, and the lot coverage didn't cover, or the lot coverage met the requirement that was implemented for that district.
So it shouldn't really matter if it's how many buildings are there, so.
Right, as long as you meet the setbacks,
Yeah.
and that is pretty clearly defined for each different area
Mhm.
about how much setback you have to have and how much
Yes,
you
And-
have to maintain.
and that's a good point. So when you talk about building permits, which do tie back into this, I would like to just say that we, maybe there's need in the long future to change that terminology to more of a zoning permit, because we are not looking at what's being developed or built inside of a building. The onus is on the property owner, and if it's commercial, then it goes back to the state fire marshal's office. But the building permit itself is actually designed to evaluate the impact to neighboring properties and the community as a whole. So we're looking at setbacks, we're looking at building height, we're looking at parking spaces, lot coverage. And those are the real big keys that we're looking for. So that's, I guess, if that's helpful when we're going through what land use types are available or not. We're pretty general when it comes to the building permit.
Okay, so to address this one, this does say accessory structure on an unoccupied lot. And right now, use is and not permitted. But, I mean, my opinion would be that like if it's an unoccupied lot and there was an accessory structure like a shed or something on it, why would that not be permitted?
Do we want a shed in the business district?
Well, I mean, well, I guess if somebody was gonna be building on it soon or something, they would go to the city, I guess, and say, I'm gonna be building and I need to put up this shed, and they could say, yes. So yes, I see your point. Yeah. So are we all in agreement that that should remain not permitted?
Didn't we discuss that one last time? I thought we did, and we
This is.
said
one
if
that-
it was there to accent another business, say next door, that it was okay. I thought we discussed that one.
We did.
Oh, yeah.
And that was why we were coming back. to
Oh,
it. I
okay.
think just to clarify when everybody was here, because we don't think everybody.
Sort of like Jerry's building, for
Right.
example. He
They-
uses it to accent Susie's business. They use it for storage and whatnot.
Right, we've discussed them all, but
Okay.
these are some that we're going back to.
Okay.
Discuss
Oh, okay.
different parts of the definition because we need clarification or codes or, whatever it was that we asked for from. the-
Yeah, so yeah, we've gone through all these and now we're going back to the ones that needed further discussion. Right.
So maybe that one should be C, if people are thinking it's okay temporarily, or it's, as a conditional use rather than a no.
I think conditional use, like.
Yeah.
Rather than just a flat out no, it's something that a person could go to the city and ask to put up a shed or whatever they needed to. And then that's on them. They think that somebody should have a shed and a lot.
So I have a question for you to just dive a little bit into it. And I think that was part of this discussion plan for tonight, is to delve into the definition itself. And if we read through it and we look at it as a detached structure such as, but not limited to, garages, sheds, playhouses, storage buildings, pergolas, garden structures, greenhouses, private studios, boathouses, and decks, does that definition meet what we're discussing as an accessory structure? The first red flag I see is private studios. Well, that would be an occupied space. So I would say if we're gonna look, and then this is where maybe Liz can share her screen, and we can look at some other definitions of accessory structures and see if maybe there's a way that we can streamline or make this more consistent and clear, concise definition of what an accessory use is. But I don't know if that's, maybe I'm not on the right page for that. I'd like to hear your guys' feedback if you want to start delving into language. And then we can come back after that with like a more drafted out version of what that looks like. But maybe we're not there yet. You guys tell me.
I don't know, because then you get into like stretching out everything.
Yep.
I don't know if we want to go there. What do you guys think? Do you want to get into, like if we start on one little thing, if we start on one little spot here and we want to break that down and, and get into changing, I guess that's what you're saying, right? Changing or discussing, getting an in-depth discussion of small details and small, I mean, it sounds like it could turn into like a huge, I've worked on things where
Yeah.
like you're cleaning your room or whatever, and you sit down with the photo album and all of a sudden you've got a huge mess in the room. This
Right.
is what that sounds like.
So, okay, I guess it would be helpful to have clarification from the group, because I think that was part of that, under my understanding, that was part of it, is how do we make these definitions work for us.
Mhm.
Dawn has mentioned a few times not having as many, maybe making them more clear and concise. If that's something that you guys want us to go back and then just provide recommendations based and do the heavy lifting internally. I think that's where we got stuck, is how involved does the group want to be? Eventually, we're gonna have to go through each definition, whether it's internally or with the group, and say, this definition, provide a recommendation of how this should change or not change.
But can we do that? Cause like I can see where we could do that as a big chunk, like if we took. If you were to say, I think that bed and breakfasts and whatever and whatever, and these different types of commercial overnight lodging all be thrown into this one category, and can we say that and then what I mean, like make big chunks rather than a bunch of little ones.
Sure.
If we cut out like blah 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 and put this all together.
Sure. Okay, so then like if we're going through just as like a basis, we're saying accessory structure needs work. We don't want to add an extra definition at this point in time for dwelling unit, so make it focused. And we can come back with that, make it focused to just an accessory that's an unoccupied structure, right? And throwing that language in, and then we do have a definition in the code under lodging that throws all of those examples of nightly rentals together. So when we get to that part of the discussion, maybe that can be helpful as a way to just have that as one category, and it can be, I think it's Seward calls it lodging, but we can call it nightly rentals. We can call it, and as a draft to move forward and look at that.
Is that what you were asking for? Dawn, was
One of my suggestions when we started going through this was to maybe combine things, would be to just go with short-term rentals and long-term rentals
Mhm.
based on a period of time. But this only works for this district
Mhm.
because you have to, once you get into residential, then there's going to be some things that are a bit different there. So if we're only looking at this, it was a suggestion. I don't know until you actually put it into play if it
Mhm.
works out when you start going through each one, but that was doing the short-term and long-term rentals and just leaving it at that. And I think the one thing we have to be careful of is bed and breakfasts have to be their own entity because they are regulated completely different. And so that one I think is gonna need, unless I'm missing something, stay completely in its own category.
So, okay, then I like that direction, all right, hearing that direction, and then going, cabin rentals potentially could remove lodge, hostel. I mean, are these all ones that could go under short-term rental, I guess, but maybe that's a question for us to figure out. We do have long-term rentals in here, but then having a short-term.
So one thing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
I looked at Liz's resource for the sewer code. And although they do have under definitions, just a lodging category, they have maybe 5 or 6 subcategories that all fall under that, including the B&B. But on their land use table, they have them all divided again. So they're not a single category on the land use table. Although on theirs, so theirs are similar to ours in that they have, depending on whether it's a B&B, a nightly rental, a motel, hotel, they all fall under a different category similar to us. Like we currently have secondary, primary, conditional. They have permitted outright, permitted, or conditional. And they didn't, although under the definitions, it helped us by taking down the categories. Under the land use table, it still had it all divided out and it didn't help minimize the amount of things. So unless we decided that we wanted to do an all encompassing for our short terms and then allow them to have the same classification under the land use. Because currently we have 3 different sections for what I would consider short-term rentals. They would need to have their own line item still.
What do you consider those sections?
For Sildovia, currently under lodging, we could put the B&B, nightly rental, cabin rental, hostel, motel, hotel, and lodge. Seward also had boarding, or rooming and short-term rental as a classification, and they didn't have some that we had.
So my question is, what is the benefit to having all of those all separated out?
Right.
I don't, other than
Yeah.
confusion.
Well, I think it depends on the municipality and the direction that the community wants to go. Seward, for instance, has some pretty significant penalties and requirements, and they have had a fairly big turnaround with their requirements and their compliancy in the community, because they have such heavy restrictions. Like, they have districts where you can only provide a rental if you're living in it, and then they have districts where you can only provide a rental if you're not living in it. I don't know that we want to be a Seward. I would hope that that's not the direction we're going. So it's okay if you are looking at lumping or slimming down things down, and making these changes to fit what this community needs, what this community wants, which is the harder part, because we have to be more out of the box and looking at what Sildovia needs.
Right, and I guess that's the thing that we talk about, all of these places that we're looking at, all their codes. They're all on the road system. We're a totally different beast than that, as I think we all want to be. So our challenges and actually, I don't think they're challenges. I think that by not being on the road system, we have the opportunity to make our community be a lot different than theirs.
Sure.
And one of those things, in my opinion, would be that we can all work together as a community to make a thriving community without so many definitions and rules that tend to make people not work together in a positive way.
Yeah.
Or make it hesitant to start something to begin with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, when we start referring to other places that are on the road system, I think we really confuse what we are as a community.
So what would you, I mean, that's where we're kind of stuck, I think, is how do we move forward? Because change is needed or desired. So, and we don't have to use anybody else's model. We can use our own. But I guess that's what, right, the intent of this group is how do we get there? It is helpful to look at other communities and the way that other people do things, even if it's to say we don't want to do it that way. But there are, definitions and uses and setback requirements and things for a purpose. So how do we meet that purpose and still provide, provide the guidelines, but also provide the support and the encouragement?
Right.
And I don't have that answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and maybe what I was attributing that to was the coming to that you have nightly rentals, or you have short-term rentals versus long-term rentals, not so much in the building code type things. I think that that's a totally different beast than this, and what the pros are to that and what the cons are to that, because that's kind of the next whole page or two. It does have to do with short-term or long-term rentals.
Okay.
And maybe that would be one avenue to take, is just kind of bounce it off of each other. What would be the pros to that and what would be the cons to that? so that we actually can look at it, because well, I think that it's a good idea. Somebody might think, have other opinions that are really good ones that I haven't thought of, but unless
We can
we.
take everybody's ideas, I mean, and make it our own.
Mhm.
I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I do have the laydown for the last meeting, November 15th work session. Oh, you're my.
No, it's on.
It's on. Oh, sorry.
Don't.
I have the laydown from the last meeting. And I had offered up some options for definition ideas. And going off of what Don was saying, a long-term rental versus a short-term rental, or having a public accommodation that I think might work to help gather those ideas together. And I don't know if you guys discussed that at the last meeting or not.
I think we just kind of breezed through.
We just
the-
kind of said, we're gonna come back to that
Yeah,
discussion. Okay.
we went through
Because
the rest of the,
This is it.
I think
we went through the rest of the.
I like watched the meeting. And I think you guys did awesome, and you jumped right into going over the land use table and getting that done. And that's great. But I think Elena had some ideas that she had emailed in. And then I had some definition ideas. I don't know. I have this one small packet, and it's like the work session for November 15th.
Okay, so I mean, to me, this isn't something that everybody has. I guess.
Do you remember?
Handy.
I'll read them. I can read it.
Okay. Maybe that. Yeah.
Public accommodation. So this could also be considered lodging, similar to what Seward had done, or it could be classified as short-term rental, but a public accommodation, hotel, motel, or other tourist accommodation providing a short-term / nightly rental. A building or group of buildings that are not owner occupied, used for transient residential purposes, containing guest rooms which are used, rented, or hired out for sleeping purposes, considered a short-term rental. The last. There.
Okay, so if we took that and as our short-term rental kind of definition, like if you took, I mean, when I was listening, you could take like short-term rental, make that your category, and take the public accommodation, hotel, motel, guest room, whatever, all that.
So
and
then
make that your definition.
we could take out nightly rental, cabin rental, hostel, motel, hotel, and lodge. And I
So-
think B&B would be different as a owner occupied.
Do we want to list those or not? I mean, in your definition, do we need to clarify? Do we need to put?
So that's my thought process, and I don't know what the pros and cons is. Why do we need all of those words? What does that? How does that benefit us? Why can't it just be short-term and long-term rentals? Is there a reason we need to define all of that? I mean,
So let's do an exercise. If we look at, for instance, cabin rentals, we've talked about removing it. I think it was recommended in removing it the last, at the ordinance that was originally inspired this conversation. So cabin rentals definition is the renting out of one or more individual detached dwelling units or buildings to provide overnight sleeping accommodations for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. Does having that definition for cabin rentals included in an overall lodging change how it would be permitted across or not permitted across the districts? If you look right now, it's permitted in residential, not permitted in our RSM, but that's our multi-district, which is really just one building. So for the discussion, if you guys don't mind, we'll skip that one. Permitted and WCR, and then conditional and industrial, commercial business district and commercial. I don't know that having it under lodging, it doesn't, that one to me maybe isn't a necessary, maybe that's not the best example. Maybe that one's one that it doesn't have a lot of applicability to the community. However, if you look at it like a bigger one, like a hotel, and currently hotel is conditional use in residential district. So you have to have a permit, a conditional use permit to have a hotel motel in a residential district. But it's permitted across the rest of the board. So if hotel motel is thrown under just a nightly rental, short-term rental definition as an overall lodging, is it going to benefit or negatively impact a residential district because it's permittable? Somebody can have a hotel or a motel in that district, or is that
Well,
not something?
don't you address that by whether or not it's permitted or not permitted or conditional in a different district than the business district?
Because we're only talking.
So that will expand our definitions then. So we'll still have hotel motel for all the other districts, but just short-term and long-term for the commercial business?
That wasn't my thinking.
Okay,
No.
so.
That
I
you would
guess I'm
just be, it's just short-term and long-term rentals.
Uh-huh,
And then, so in a residential area,
Uh-huh.
it can become conditional
for any rental?
For short term.
for short term. Or it can become permitted. I guess, so maybe what you need to, maybe when you say that, now I see what you're saying so if you were going to use that definition and get completely rid of the rest, or it could just be not applicable in the other ones, and this can only be for the business district that you did that. But what you could do is maybe make it to where if for residential and other areas besides the business district, that then those, you could put a number of rooms on it.
Right, which I think is what the hotel motel
Right.
maybe does to begin with.
So
and
you
this
could do the
overfly.
long-term or short-term rentals not in excess of so many, and the long-term rentals not in excess on a single property of not so many, but I don't know.
And then the other half of that, then if they are in excess, then they're the hotel motel, or they are a long-term or short-term in excess of that many rooms.
Mhm. It was just, the hotel motel thing, in my opinion, needs to go away in a sense, or become just thrown into the nightly rental thing. I don't see how that is
Well,
helpful
There are.
in the business district. See, you're talking about I think, of
Yes.
residential.
Yeah.
And I'm only focusing on the business district part of
Yeah.
things.
And I hear you on that, and I also hear when we went back to the International Building Code and we talk about commercial requirements, hotel motel. Certainly that if there are requirement, I mean, it is different than just a nightly rent.
Right, which there would be, I mean, when you do the nightly rentals, you would need to put in there that would, the space or the building still has to meet those codes based on occupancy. And I think we talked about that a few times too, is that building codes are based on occupancy, and a lot of nightly rental situations. So it would just have to be in the definition that you have to meet the building codes. For how much ever occupancy or how many occupants
Yeah.
you have or your building is built for. I mean, inevitably, any building that's built has to meet the building codes based on whatever occupancy they're going to have. Which is different to me than what we're talking about here.
So what would you, for a building in the commercial business district that had a rental that had 5 or more rooms, what would you call it? I'm just trying to, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to
No,
work
not
through
at
this
all.
process.
No, I mean, that's
What-
how we
what you would call that.
figure out problems,
Yeah.
but I don't know that we have to call it anything.
Mhm.
It just they have to meet the building code.
It just has-
But that doesn't have anything to do with whether nightly rentals or long-term rentals are permitted in the business district. You
I
don't
hear
have
what
to
you're saying.
define each thing for this
Mhm.
part of it. It has to be defined
Other districts.
yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that's a trick maybe for the planning commission and for staff to evaluate. And that's something to consider even as a group, even if these recommendations are provided and this great work is done. If we're shortening things in the business district, but it's making things bigger and broader in other districts, we will have to have a comprehensive look on how to make it work for everything.
Right, right. And I mean, I think that was one of the things that we came to in the last meeting is that maybe some of this needs to be when you're looking at a building code rather than when you're looking at the different uses, maybe what you need to be able to do is say that it's just not applicable for this area rather than doing the conditional thing. Because that to me only creates more work and more confusion and only opens everybody up to argument's sake. We need to try to get as much conditional out of there as possible. Because that's just ugly. It takes a lot of people's time. Everybody starts thinking, well, this person got to do this, or it doesn't solve a problem. It only creates more.
One thing I did see in a few other town codes, land use tables, is they would just leave the box blank. And in the beginning, it would say if left blank, it's not applicable. Yes, for us. Or it might not have said it's not applicable. There might have been, the verbiage might have been different. Or
reason?
You
So
do
that
have to
left-
be
just left it
careful
blank.
and put not permitted. Not applicable is different than not permitted. And that's
touchy.
yeah.
So I'm wondering if that was the reasoning behind leaving it blank.
Leaving
to
it blank
not-
for not applicable.
Right,
Let's see if I can find it on this one real fast.
you're not saying, no, you can't do it, you're just.
Right.
You're not saying.
That definition doesn't fall into any purview of that district.
I guess I'm not really following why grouping everything short-term wouldn't fit across all the districts. It seems like it should.
Well, it depends on if you want a hotel, a large scale hotel in the residential district. Where we currently allow short-term
table.
rentals in the residential district.
Oh, we could just have none rentals in the.
The table that has all the districts. on it.
That'd be great for my business, but I'm afraid that there might be a.
There might be some people that disagree with you.
Yeah.
We could look at
because-
just
Yeah.
any.
I mean, and I get why, I
Something.
mean, I have both, so. I mean, telling somebody.
But-
that-
We might be able to resolve that with 4 categories. I pulled up 3 things, 4 categories. Short-term rental, long-term rental, short-term rental exceeding 5 rooms, long-term rental exceeding 5 rooms.
Why not just call it a hotel and then
Yeah.
fiveplex that are more,
Right.
so happy.
Mhm.
You're not shrinking anything by doing that, you're just changing words.
Well, I think we're getting rid of a lot of dwellings and.
Yeah.
that kind, I mean, I think we do get rid of some that way.
So does hostel then fit? What is everybody's thoughts on, the hostel definition being a budget oriented, lower cost, short term. Shared room dormitory accommodation that accepts individual travelers across the districts, except for commercial residential, it's a conditional use. But if we put it under a short-term rental, it's all just short-term rental. It doesn't matter if you have a quick kitchen dwelling unit or you're just renting out a room. Does
And
that,
I did look because I couldn't figure out why that was separate and I searched and searched. And the only thing that I can think of why they have, or that at some point that got put in separate and it's in lots of places separately, is maybe it has something to do with the amount of people that you're allowed to have in a space, but I couldn't, I couldn't find any reason why you would separate it out. I mean, like bed and breakfast, you can see why
Yeah.
based on
owner
regulation and things like that and why they're separated out, but I couldn't find it in anything, why a hostel and the would have ever been separated out. Other than my guess was maybe in a hostel situation.
But then, I mean, why?
In a hostile situation, maybe you're allowed to have more people in a small space. I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't figure it out.
It's more communal.
Yeah,
Hostel is more communal. You don't have to have so many, like bathrooms and beds, a combination or where everybody's like sleeping on the floor on bunk beds. or
Right,
something.
but I couldn't find any regular.
But like the odd, or the Driftwood Inn in Homer, there's a shared bathroom for everybody that stays upstairs. I mean, that's the only option, and it's still called an inn, it's not called a home.
So maybe maybe it has something to do with bigger,
Like a
maybe it has
dormitory.
to do
style
with
system.
how many people utilize a like septic system or some, maybe that's how it got into some of these regulations. I just couldn't figure out for a small community how that is, because that would be an issue. I mean, if you can pack 20 people into a
Rooms.
very small location and they're all using the same facilities, that does have a huge impact on water and sewer. So because we are billed based on the amount of rooms we have, so that thinking would be based on how many people are going to be the occupancy of that building. So maybe an occupancy of a hostel with one bathroom is a lot more than the occupancy of, say, one of my rooms that only 4 people can be in. And I don't know that for sure, but it was interesting to me. I didn't
wonder
understand
how,
the reason.
because there used to be employee housing for the cannery, down by the cannery. And then there was another one down here where Elias and Sydney and them are, that was employee housing for the cannery also. And there was a ton of people packed into those, so I wonder what those were called.
Bunkhouse.
Bunkhouse?
Canneries have bunkhouses.
But that's not in this table.
Right. So anyhow, I don't know.
wonder
if
if
that
hostel
was-
and a
I wonder
bunkhouse
if
are
at some
different.
point it was just
Has
taken out.
hostels
I mean, it's
always been in
been-
there, Heidi?
No, hostels is fairly new. That's one that came over in my tenure here. It actually was brought up and recommended by Councilmember Rojas. And I can't speak completely to her intent or my memory, but if I'm remembering correctly, I believe it had to do with wanting to have more lodging opportunities or options in the community. I don't know that we don't have any existing right now. Maybe this is not something we have to meet at this time, and can be evaluated in the future and just removed for now,
Yeah,
or.
or maybe ask her, why was it that she thought that needed to be added?
Yeah,
Where, how it was that a hostel wouldn't be per,
included in everything else.
Yes.
considered lodging.
Right.
I mean, it would be.
Maybe the definition should be just long-term, short-term.
Mhm.
And then it's up to the property owner. If they want to name it a hostel, that's their business, or you want to name your business a
Right.
lodge or a bed and breakfast. But as far as the city's concerned, it's just short-term, long-term. It's up to the property owner. If they cram 100 people in the hostel, well, we better declare it a hotel and pay you more utilities,
Mhm.
so to speak.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Well,
Just
or
as
if
far
they-
as the city's concerned, short and long term, period, boom, that's it. And then the property owner names it whatever they want, and that's
as
between
long
them
as
and.
they still meet the building
Codes.
Yeah, and I think
Correct.
that was the
Well,
building code, motel was over 5 rooms, so 6 and up rooms, and then 5 and under, if it was owner occupied, and 5 and under rooms, you could fall under the residential code. So that's the
I have
distinction
to look
there.
at those numbers again. I had I have all my paperwork. It's just in a box in the list somewhere.
Oh, no.
We can look back at occupancy as well and see if
Mhm.
that makes a difference. But, okay, that's in general, for now, it sounds like that's not maybe not a necessary addition. And then so motel, hotel, potentially leave a separate lodge. But I mean, the definition we have right now, building or group of buildings containing 5 or fewer guest rooms used for the purpose of offering public lodging on a day-to-day basis. Is there any reason people would see that that would need to be separate from a short-term rental or a long-term rental?
Nope.
Okay,
As long as we don't start messing with whether lodging includes kitchens or not.
well, it's not right now. It doesn't right now, so it just be short-term rental.
We're not.
I like, but we're gonna.
Just throwing that out there.
Well, and so. That, that's a point, is that a short-term or a long-term residential rental. Right now, the definition does include that it would be, well, at least for long-term, that it is a dwelling unit, which.
But why are we even? Those things just
Go away.
go away. I mean, that is what is causing all the confusion. It's no different.
Mhm. So you can
that's
just
what we
rent out
have-
anything.
That's what we're
Yeah.
trying to achieve is.
No.
Trim this
I
down.
mean, because what is the harm in renting or?
And you've
Why-
already,
Yeah, what is the difference between renting out a room with a kitchen versus not renting out a room without a kitchen? What?
and
No.
What is?
you have said that any structure that is gonna be inhabited has to have water and sewer.
It's true,
So it's up to the person renting it whether or not they want a kitchen.
true.
I'm not gonna rent it, it doesn't have a kitchen. Okay, I'm gonna rent this other place.
Yeah.
Or I wanna eat at the bar every night for the 6 months that I'm gonna be here. So I'm gonna have this long-term rental and eat at
And
the
so
bar.
now you saying that is maybe what the deal was with the hostel. Because maybe the hostel that is in there, does it say that it has to have water and sewer? Or can it just be?
It would have to, because it doesn't say it specifically, but anything occupied is supposed to have
Have
water
water
and
and
sewer.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Anything within the city limits.
Mhm.
So I guess that's the big, I'm gonna write a note for myself. So if it has to have water and sewer, then why are we stressing dwelling?
Yeah, because from the city's perspective, what do they care? Whether or not they're gonna have a kitchen in it or not have a kitchen.
Mhm.
If it's all agreed that when you open up this establishment. A certain amount of proceeds or, taxes go to the city for this room. What do you care whether or not it has a kitchen in it? I don't know. Is it because of? I mean, I would be responsible for any kind of insurance. If there was a kitchen, blah, 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 blah. I'm not sure
Mhm.
what the city would care. If there's a kitchen or not.
Can you pull back up those definitions from the floor again? I just wanted.
Hostel generally has a shared kitchen.
Yeah, everybody's kind
And
of.
so then the water and sewer.
And they don't always have a kitchen. Depending on what country you go to.
Yeah, sometimes it's just a bunk bed and a bathroom.
And, or quite a few bunk beds.
Yeah.
So does that take us through all of our lodging? And we can, and then that, so that leaves us, we can bring back a more solidified definition and land use table on that section draft. And then if we go, unless there's anything else on lodging, we can go to the other portion of the discussion for this evening, which was dwelling units. Correct? Or is there more you guys wanted to talk about directly related to nightly rentals?
So you're still saying that we'll have a short-term, a long-term, and a bed and breakfast category
And a motel hotel,
and a motel hotel category?
because those are occupancy related.
That's not what I read out of it.
Well, wouldn't the bed and breakfast fall under the short term?
Well, the bed and breakfast has to be different because.
Well, as
of
far as the
food
city's
service.
concerned, though, I realize that if you put bed and breakfast on your business, that's what you're representing, but as the city is still a short-term dwelling, isn't it?
It's different because it's of the occupancy, it requires an owner occupancy to be a bed and breakfast. For the
For the purposes of permitting.
I
for-
got you, I got you.
Yeah.
So I couldn't call mine that because I'm not living there.
And for those people who want to cook for somebody else, you are amazing.
Where all this-
Nicholas is on the next page.
So, but I
here.
think, to clarify though, I thought we were going short-term, long-term bed and breakfast. Not hotel motel wasn't.
I think the hotel motel, what we're saying, or is because anything with the 5 or more rooms. You have to have a definition for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
It's a different set of rules,
it's.
a different set of
Yeah.
regulations.
Mhm. But that. I mean, that pares it way down.
Mhm.
But I guess I need a data. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Think about that a little too, because I.
What are we taking away though? I mean, we're not, if you.
Cabins,
Lodge,
Cabin hostels, hostels.
dwelling unit, nightly rentals.
Yeah,
I still think people do the hotel motel. That is just. Part of. That you have to build in accordance with the. Building code,
Right, no matter
that has nothing to do with this, but. Mhm.
but city.
You can
citywide-
do what Nicola was saying, I mean, in certain categories. It's either not permitted or you just leave it blank or it's,
But it would be applicable in this, and it wouldn't be applicable in others, so it doesn't hurt the district for it to be left in.
Mhm.
And it might actually impair and negatively impact some of the rest of the city potentially if it was taken out. So we can
think-
evaluate it further and think about it.
Mhm.
But because that is a commercial building.
Right.
So if you're making that category so broad, I know your guys' focus is commercial business district, but thinking of the city as a whole, I think that leaving it there is not going to negatively impact this district, but it may others if we remove it. So let's think on it a little bit.
Yeah, because we do get a lot of them out of there, because it looks to me like we remove by doing the long-term and short-term rentals. I think we're clarifying things, and I think that pairs, it looks to me like 6 things down to 2, is that?
Yeah, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4,
least
5, 5 down to 2.
And then we can come back around and see if we can do it again. But, I mean, I think it's one of those things you don't want to do too much unless you're starting over from scratch, and I don't think that that's what we're doing, so. Yeah, maybe we can,
out later than the.
yeah, maybe we can look at it and see what it looks like, and maybe you look at it and say, oh, no, I didn't think of this, but you gotta. I think it's a good start to get some of them,
Trimming some fat.
yeah.
Yeah, and then so even looking at these definitions, and this may not be the discussion for tonight, but you know, you're looking at short-term residence rental, short-term rental. And for the discussion that we just had about dwelling unit and not being necessary, the first words is a resident, so.
Right.
We can come back with that, but I think that's a really good start. To make that so it's not dwelling unit specific or, right, as accessory. Okay. Yeah.
I know. Lena is
Come up
not
with,
here.
I mean, I think that when you're doing the short-term, long-term, then you have to have a number of days in there,
Absolutely,
which we can use as
yeah.
the tax base.
Mhm.
Anything over 30 days.
Yeah.
it becomes a long-term rental.
Yeah, and that one, I mean, that one. I would say 30 days is probably the best answer that could be given there, even on the city standpoint. We just ran into that, for instance, with our annuals with the borough. We were charging sales tax for the service of providing an annual for a boat. We got a slap on the hand. We actually have to, even though the service is for a year, the borough doesn't go over 30 days. So every month has to have a tax on it. And that's same for nightly rentals. So if you're nightly, that's fine. Every night gets a rental. But if you're going over 30 days, then it's monthly and every month counts.
Right.
So like 90 days, you would still be 3 months worth of sales tax. It's just to keep that consistent. 30 days would be my recommendation for that language.
Right. The 30 days does run into a bit of an issue, I'm sure for some lodging, like when we're doing construction projects, there's some of them that are here for longer than 30 days, and
Yeah.
so
not necessarily an issue,
Mhm.
and that's something that I think we keep running back around in these discussions, is that no building is held to one purpose or one use. They're all multi-use. You can have if you have multiple units, you have one that's long-term year-round. You have a couple that are short-term, you have one that swaps between the two.
right.
You're not held to one to the other.
I think just need to make sure that we
Clarify.
cover that
Yeah.
somehow, because that'll be next year's.
So-
Meeting.
I need to
Otherwise,
clarify my mind. Okay, say we put in 3 rental units,
Mhm.
one of them permanent.
Mhm.
Do we still have to have that exemption from the city, that permit?
No,
Because you're meeting your primary use of lodging.
I get, okay, let's use Leslie's for an example.
Mhm.
Okay, we've got a residence upstairs.
Sure.
Okay, we're putting in 3 units down. So one of those units you could rent permanently
Sure, you could rent 2 of them, and then if you had.
and then
weekly
just have
rentals-
one single rental.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So basically you'd have 3 permanent
Mhm.
residents and 1 rental.
Well, and so then that's also a bigger discussion that we're having, is then should nightly rental, or not like, should long-term rentals as a whole be permitted year-round as the primary? And that's something that's come up in this group as potentially yes. And when that would mean you could rent the whole place as a long-term rental, each unit, but we haven't gotten that far in the discussion yet. That I don't think we've settled on anything, but I know it's been brought up. Am I speaking out of turn? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I thought it had been brought up only as long as you had something that was
As a
a
secondary.
business
Yeah,
within it, which can be a nightly rental.
yes,
So I don't remember it ever being that the whole building would
Okay.
be a
Being
rental, because then that
primary.
would fall under that there's 3
and
of,
then,
or how many of are allowed to be
yeah,
a long-term rental.
okay, you're right. So yes, if you rented the whole thing as a long-term residential, then you would need the permit,
But as
but
long as you kept 1 room out and rented it nightly,
Right.
yeah,
you could
Then-
rent the rest of them
that-
permanent.
yeah,
Yes.
That's the way it stands now.
correct.
Okay.
What if somebody would put up condos?
well, condos are long-term
They're
own them.
long-term.
You own them.
unless,
But
yeah,
but if I built condos down here and I lived in one of them myself,
And then you had nightly rentals in one?
no, if they were all permanent rentals.
No, that's what we're saying. That's a secondary use. You would have to have a use that
But
was.
it's a business.
Mhm. Yeah. I know, we've talked about this. I don't know that I don't know that we've come to a conclusion, but it has.
I mean,
come
it's
up.
coming, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I don't know where, but I mean, it's gonna come up because it's gonna happen. Somebody's gonna wanna do it.
Condos.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it might not be a bad thing.
No.
I mean, it might,
No, it's
Be a good
business.
thing.
Why discourage it?
so. I mean, will it impact my business tremendously? Yes, but then you have to, I mean, that's part of being in business. You have to go with the flow and make things work for you. So. But if they were all long-term, as of how it is right now, you can't do long-term rentals in the entire building. And a condo situation is one building.
Mhm.
So
Correct.
They would have to have something in that condo complex that is either nightly rental or a business of some sort which we still haven't got to that, which was the thing that I think has to come first in the business district is definition of business.
Mhm.
And it's not a long definition. If you look in the dictionary, it's real short. And so I
Mhm.
think that that's an important thing to come to before we're done here.
Yeah, I think,
Is a suggestion of what this group thinks that the definition of business should be.
do you have
Yeah.
a suggestion?
The definition,
Yes.
I have a couple of them
You want to share them?
here, but I'll make sure and provide them.
Okay. Yeah, it does state a
In business is what I should
Yeah.
say, not the definition of business, the definition of in business.
right, and so, but Liz did mention that in her memo, and I believe that was our intent for the next meeting, but
Okay,
it can be this one if we
No,
want to
no,
dive
no,
into
no.
it. I think we
want
are
my
just
stuff.
trying to, we're trying to cover occupancy in this
Yeah.
meeting
right,
to help with
no, I
that.
think that's great.
And I know Elena is not here, but if we're going back to that thing, she did have some pulleys up here, that same memo. Her ideas for nightly rentals, if we wanna look at those for that part of the discussion. And these were the suggestions that she had had for nightly rentals, but we might be past that by now. Oops.
Yeah, so to clarify on this one, and I did misspeak earlier, Walt. Nightly rentals are not permitted, but a lodge is. So right now, if you were a lodge. And long-term residential and the rest, you would be permitted. So it's just, it doesn't work. So she talks about making it permitted, and it sounds like that's a consensus of those short-term rentals should be permitted.
I was also under the assumption that it's 51% of your building is the business.
That isn't.
Misconception. So that is something that we did talk about when we brought up the draft ordinance, and it's something I've heard since even prior to working for the city. I've been working for the city for almost 7 years, is that was a requirement. I went back to the code to 1967 or whatever it is, and I have never seen where there was a figure that determined how much of a business needed to be a business. So that is
Where it is at is in
Where did we
the,
find that?
huh?
So why do I think this? Where
Because
did I read
you
it?
read it is in the comprehensive plan. Is where it's at,
Okay.
but it is not in the code or the regulations.
there's some other weird ones too that.
And I've noticed that there is a lot of things that come up that aren't, or not a lot, a few things that come up that people are just so definite about.
Uh-huh. That don't exist.
But they're getting it out of that comprehensive plan and it
Just toss
that's
the
not.
comprehensive. The next time when you do a round circle, toss the comprehensive plan till the end.
Yeah, so I mean, that is, but that's a valid question, or that's applicable, is that something that needs to be regulated, is how much of a building on Main Street needs to be in business versus lived in? And I'm not asking you to answer it tonight, and not saying one way or the other, but I'm just
I'll
saying
answer.
that's.
My opinion is absolutely not. There is
Yeah.
no way for you to regulate that,
Mhm.
first of all. And also you can have an extremely successful business in a 20 by 20 and what do you care how much of the rest of the building is used? If you have a successful business that is producing an income for a family or a group of people and a revenue to the city.
And so I think that comes back to the definition of in business.
Mhm.
And so as long as you're meeting that need, that
in
of being in business, and not just putting up a faux purpose to be able to meet that need to be in the
Right.
district, then why does it matter?
And I think that that is the issue is that let's get to something that people don't have to play games.
Mhm.
That's very real.
Mhm.
And back to these suggestions, respectfully, number 3, nightly rentals be temporarily permitted. Me personally, I have a huge issue with that. You can't start a business temporarily. I mean, I wouldn't be able to sell my business. I wouldn't be able to come up with books for people moving forward. That doesn't work for people that are truly in business.
It's
ever.
pretty hard. You go out and spend a couple of $100,000 and say, oh, we changed it, by the way, at last meeting.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just a way to
Yeah.
get the city in a big old lawsuit.
It is. I mean, it's
yeah,
just not
I'm
fair
with you
to,
on
it's
that.
not fair to businesses.
Mhm.
to
If
do
there's a
that.
market and you're renting them, who cares? You know, we want people here.
Mhm.
Sort of like fish and say, well, you know, if you don't catch so many fish, we're gonna take your license away,
Mhm.
you know. But when you're talking about something like that, you're spending money
Mhm.
to make those rentals.
Mhm.
And I think just to say, oh, we might change our mind next month,
Mhm.
I don't think that's a good idea.
That'd be hard.
It would be. Then we start playing games and say, well, yeah, it's a rental, but it's not really there. We, you know, put up a sign in, sign only.
Right. Which is
That's what causes that to happen.
Yeah, and that's what Don was just saying, we don't want that
Right.
to continue.
You be fair with us, we'll be fair with you. Kind of thing.
Yeah, and then I guess further into that, when you start reading those, that's somebody else telling somebody else how to run their business. And I think that just gets really messy. And so. Yeah, I don't quite agree with that. Number 5.
Number 5 didn't show up on the last page.
That's primary. Yeah, I don't agree with it. But
Well, and
Some people
speaking
do.
from experience, we've both had available spaces for someone else to operate a pop-up niche
Mhm.
seasonal business, and those spaces weren't utilized.
Mhm.
So should we be in trouble for, for not having an additional business?
I think it just gets messy all the way around. When you start trying to tell people what they need to do in their spaces. And then that comes back to just defining what in business is.
So is there gonna be a percentage like we had before, how many lodgings can be established in a commercial business district? Because I see that having a little niche, little spot for to be in business is the whole purpose of having the commercial business district to have a place where people can go.
But
To buy
who-
something in a store, not just go and get a room.
I would
Stay.
love to have a street full of vendors
Yeah.
with markets, and
How do we promote
things.
that?
it's difficult to find employees. It's difficult to find, to only have this 2 to 4 hour window of when the tourists are walking through town. It's difficult to operate
maybe a-
those type of,
Overnight
Businesses.
accommodations, then the tourists are walking through town all night long.
but not if we limit the amount of overnight accommodations that we have.
But then if we don't have a place for them to go buy stuff, and they're wandering around looking for what am I gonna do?
Right, it's the cart and the horse, or the
Yeah.
chicken and the egg, or the supply and demand.
One's
So
gonna
I
be
think you
the other.
hit the nail on the head. What can be done to help promote business? Because it has to be something, because I can, so right now, and this is interesting too, because I'm in a weird spot. So I have a couple different, so Central Suites isn't in the business district. But I have a area there that is rented out to Fathoms. I have another area that I'm working on getting somebody else to do something. So now I have 2 little niche things in my building. I have a whole business. It is the place that's on the waterfront and this one, but this one isn't in the commercial district. So should I, and I will tell you right now, hands down, those businesses, I could rent out those 2 spaces as a room and make a lot more money than what I can rent to a retailer or a retail business for. And it's still going to be a struggle for, I don't know what retail business, because if I did, I'd put one in that could make me money. And what good does it do to have buildings that are vacant because versus having nightly accommodations? And the nightly accommodations, I think, some people, or in my mind, sometimes we miss the boat there, is where I rent out my spaces. They are doing business in this community, but they are not coming to go to a gift shop. They are coming to go fishing, they're coming to go biking, they're coming to go hiking, they're coming to go to the beach, go hunting. That is who I am getting into my business, and that's why it is important that I have kitchens in all of my rooms. Because you don't know if there's gonna be a place to eat or not. And that's not my decision to make or tell somebody you have to go and open a restaurant, even if you're gonna lose money. That's not. I mean, they can't. You can't tell somebody to do something that isn't going to make them money.
Or if
And-
we put in another restaurant, it will take away some of the, it will help assist in some of the very busy days of the summer, but it will also take away the steady business that they do manage to get from the locals. And it will hurt their bottom line. We don't have enough people consistently to make it work. Otherwise, there would be more restaurants.
Yeah,
I mean, when I first moved here, there was.
Yeah, yeah.
but doing this hopefully will help promote and encourage those that are in business and doing business and want to do business so that we can get there.
It's just figuring out what we can do to make it work. And currently, that's providing overnight accommodations. And when there are opportunities that we think something else will be able to work, then someone is going to jump in and do that. We can't force people to do that.
I think the
Unfortunately.
market kind of
Marcia,
balances, doesn't it? I
you sit in a
mean,
gift shop and have all your beading full time, please. I'll come watch you bead.
And do all the other things that I want.
But
to
I
do.
think when you
Yeah.
bring more people to town and when you have buildings that are being kept and buildings that are being fixed up, that encourages more people to come to town. And as more people come to town, it's like Walt says, the market will enable those things to happen. When I first started coming here, there was 4 restaurants. There's a reason there's not 4 restaurants anymore, and it's not because those restaurants all got turned into lodging. I mean,
And it's not because there's less people. If you want to point on that, honestly, if you look at city records for the amount of people that are coming in through this community daily, it's increasing every year. This year was a little bit less than last year, but only by like a couple hundred. It wasn't, I mean, last year was a banner year and it was still up, I think like 8% from the year before this year.
people
So,
are just doing different things with their money. They don't buy little things. They bring families to go on vacation
Or
because
have to escape.
you can blame it on Amazon or whatever, but you know, who's gonna come and buy something in enough quantity that can have you be open as a little store? They're not, they're gonna order it off of Amazon because it costs them $50 to haul it back, you know? It's sad, but it's true. I mean,
I think when you say that, Heidi, and I don't mean, I think we're talking about people who are coming across on the ferry and then get back on and go back on the ferry. That's one thing.
Mhm.
But to me, the people that are gonna spend the most money in this community are the ones that are gonna come and rent a room for 2 or 3 days.
well, some of those people come and they stay.
Well, I know.
And we
but
encourage it. Every conversation, come and stay.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The longer, it's sort of like a casino, the longer we can keep them here.
Mhm.
You ever watch that?
People that come, you get people like Don, who decide that they want to live here and they want to have their business here,
Right.
you get those people here, or you know. You started out as a visitor too, you came to this community as a visitor, then you decided that you wanted to stay and you put down roots, and so those people, they happen here and there.
Well, I actually did those first trades I didn't see.
That's right, you did. I forgot.
Nevertheless, it just seems to me like if we could fill up every rental that's here and build more. And then eventually, I mean, we got a whole strip of commercial and 80% of it's vacant. Let's face it. So it's not as though we're running out of commercial space.
And we have other
My
districts
theory
that
is
you can have
fill
a
it up
shop
with
in.
as many people as you can and then let them govern the market as far as another restaurant or this, that's gonna open up
Mhm.
that other, what you're talking about. But if we start restricting rooms, it's here as a sign, well, we're only wanna grow this much, go away.
Mhm.
I think I'm just so against that. I think the more people you get here, keep them as long as possible. Then you're gonna get more revenue, period.
I think it would be a great problem to have. If we had too many people succeeding at overnight rentals.
I just think people are gonna get here if it's over, like, the service industry, what you're talking about, I can see is needed, and that's business. Taking people on hikes, bird watching, fishing, biking and all that kind of stuff, so that's a business that you could. It wouldn't take up much space in a.
but who's gonna pay for that? I mean, I know like the bird watching, I mean, she does it out of her house. She's not gonna come and rent a space for me to do that, to have a spot. Cause I would be happy to rent that to.
Well, and so that's another really poignant point, I think, that I don't, and again, know if we need to dwell into tonight, but when you talk about the change of how business is happening and you look at just recent years with pandemic, and the model of people being able to work from home, work remote, to do more things out of small, I mean, this is something we're seeing nationwide. I don't know about worldwide, but nationwide, of more and more people moving away from brick and mortar.
Yes. And so then how you change that is you tell them they can't do business out of their house. Well, nobody's gonna do that. I mean, not. I mean, because then that does put them, so that takes a residential place and puts them in the business district.
Mhm.
Is that healthy? I don't think so. I don't think so.
So can you clarify what you're saying again to me?
So if you say that no residential, you can't do business out of your home, you have to be in the business district to do
Yeah.
business. I don't think that's healthy. That's not the way our world is going.
Which is why we have a home occupation definition.
Right. And so, but that's the thing, nobody is going to come, if their business can be run out of their home, they're not going to come and rent a space from me.
Mhm.
In the business district,
Mhm.
so then I have to find something that pays. So that I can stay open and pay my bills. And that right now. Is rentals. But if somebody has another idea, I will support it 100%. I will go to their shop every day, and I mean, I do, I go down, I get caught. I mean, that's the thing, is that. You have to support the businesses then year round once they start, and not everybody's gonna do that for lots of reasons. You just get busy, you don't stop in, I mean, we all do it. But still, businesses have to make money, businesses are in the business of making money, and.
Well, that's being in business.
And
So, this is just sort of an aside, I was in Girdwood, I lived there for most of my life in Alaska, and it came up that a little post after the holidays, that it was on Facebook or something saying, all you people that are bringing people into Girdwood, tell them to bring food with them, because there's just a little tiny store, and the people that live here kind of need that food to survive, so I think that's what's gonna happen, that we'll need to promote all the lodging people, for people to bring their food with them, because there's not, it's a food desert. We're getting beef.
Well, don't we want to support Tata?
Food desert.
Come and shop here.
Yeah.
Shop
and the
in our
restaurants we
community
have.
and come to our restaurant.
Yeah.
You are
Every-
welcome to bring your food, but
Yeah,
come to the
Yeah, it's really
community to,
discouraging, I think, I mean, to see people hauling in.
Yeah, so
Coolers and
there's
coolers and coolers full of
enough
food and.
here to
again, that
Right
would
now.
be a great problem to
Yeah.
have. If we become a food desert, let's figure out that problem when we get to it. But right now, let's support the
so
businesses that we
figure
do
it out
have.
before we get there. I mean, you can't just run up the road to Acreage like you can in Girdwood. You know.
Yeah.
but we have Tata here that is open 6 days a week, I mean, every
There's not
contractor.
a whole lot to choose from there.
Oh, well, my contractors thought that it, compared to most villages that they've been in, every single one of them that has come here, not one of them has said anything but amazing things.
Ah,
Because they paid 3 times more than what Tata charges in
Yes.
other villages, and I know that firsthand because I've been to all the other villages in my previous job, and a gallon of milk is $20 in
Yeah.
lots of the villages, so.
And we have
If you
flying
price shop
services
Tata,
too.
But I do
Save
see that
more?
there is a huge problem if Tata was to close.
Yeah.
But then there's that opportunity for somebody else to open a business, and I think the fuel and lube is, I mean, you guys' inventory has went up
Yes.
Yeah.
dramatically in the last few years.
Wherever we see need.
Okay, well, that was just an interesting observation, and it's kind of see a parallel, because there's.
Yeah, but they're on the road system. I mean,
They are.
take a half-day trip up to Anchorage and load up.
Yeah, well.
Your food
if it's
desert.
Well, we have
starting
the
in
clients
the
here.
middle of winter,
See,
it's not that easy.
We got-
We lived there for
We
years.
gotta support Smoky Bay and the other guys that fly over here. They bring groceries all the time.
Yeah.
Was Ronnie, so Ronnie brings food and stuff from Anchorage all the time.
But I'm with you. I think it's a good problem to have. Let's try to have it. The more people we got here,
The more money they're spending when they come
then,
here. when
then
they-
the rest will come with it eventually. Once the market's there, but you can't go out and buy a bunch of groceries and sit there and no people to buy them too. It's a,
Yeah.
you know, they both go hand in hand. Get the people here first and then we'll figure out the groceries.
It's a lot like gambling.
I bet we can fly a lot of
It
groceries
is.
in real quick.
That's being in business.
Betting I can sell this many whatever, before they go bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty tough.
So, if we want to, in the next 25 minutes, to get through dwelling, and maybe that's not something that we can accomplish tonight, but we can at least take a peek at it. And then the next meeting will be a big deep dive into business and in business. And then from there, we should be able to bring back a really nice draft land use table and definitions, accompanying definitions based on these discussions. And dwelling units, the reason why this is coming up is because they're. And I made a note here that maybe dwelling unit is not the right word and maybe it just needs to be residential, and I can look into that further. But you'll see that we have 4 definitions right now, and 2 of these definitions are specific to the commercial business district. And that is the dwelling unit attached residential and dwelling unit attached multi-residential. And the reason why those are in there is because in the commercial business district at this point in time, you can't, it's not permitted to have just a dwelling unit. So it would be attached to something else. It's attached to a nightly rental, it's attached, or a short-term rental, it's attached to some other purpose. I'm not saying that has to stay that way. I'd love to hear from the group feedback, but that's the way that these 4 sit. Maybe we have dwelling units, structures containing 4 or less, structures containing 5 or more. I feel like that's probably pretty pared down, and that was pared down recently, I think in the last 5 years when the land use table was implemented. I was part of that process, and that was paring it down from duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes, and it just, you're either smaller or you're larger, and that has a lot to do with commercial regulations on the size of the building. So those 2 are in there. And they are currently not permitted dwelling unit 4 or less units or 5 or more in the commercial business district. With the intent that you can't just have all long-term residential rentals or all living, just long-term living in the district at this point. And then the attached, you know, I don't know, maybe they don't need to be there because we already have it in those definitions. I'd love to have your guys' feedback. Does it work? Does it not work? How do we make it work for the district? And I don't know if you had more on it.
No,
what-
that kind of covers it.
I thought too. So I thought that these all went away, or is there with the long-term and short-term rentals? I mean, I know they can't go, some of them can't go away with other, the dwelling unit goes away.
You're talking about the entire definition going away for all of the districts in the
No.
city?
I'm only talking about the business district.
Only about businesses.
Because this is not being applicable.
Yeah. And I mean, if we were talking about the other districts, I would have some thought processes to
Uh-huh.
that, but we're not.
Mhm.
And so, to me, these have no use anymore when you go with the short-term and the long-term rentals. With the exception of one, you're gonna need one that is, whether you come up with dwelling or residential,
Mhm.
which I mean, that's just a word.
Right, and having the one, and then it's a secondary use at
Mhm.
this point. Okay. Just one, and it's an accessory, secondary. Just one for CD.
We're saying 1 dwelling unit.
Right,
Yeah,
or
just
res-
dwelling
I
unit.
They're
almost
talking
like
about
the
doing
word
with-
residential,
I kinda
because
like
that
that.
just makes it make sense to me.
Yeah.
Because dwelling, that's just weird to me. It's a residential, to me, is a long-term residential where a family would live. Is what I think that the one definition that you need.
Okay. And secondary, okay. We can work on that.
Is this where condos would fit in?
Yeah, it'd be a residential use.
And the units are individual family occupied unit, not rooms? So it's not like a house with 5 rooms?
Right, so if you look at
Condos still
dwelling,
can't fit into this.
is a dwelling unit means 1 or more rooms in addition to a bathroom, which includes kitchen facilities and are arranged, designed, or used for living quarters by a family.
It's the living quarters thing that gets you, because like mine, I have 4, I mean, could a family live in there full time? In every one of mine, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's where you have to go with the long term and the short term, and that only one of those units could be, well, it isn't just one of those units, but one of the units within my building has to be either a nightly rental or a
Yes.
storefront.
So maybe instead of, because we keep talking about occupancy, maybe instead of the term living quarters for family, it's owner occupied or.
Well,
family
owner,
They don't have to own it.
yeah,
For it to be.
Long-term residence.
Yeah,
Well, there's a difference between being designed for living quarters and being used as a residence or short-term rental. So if it's designed as a living quarters, that
well,
is.
all of mine are designed. for
Yeah,
living
so
quarters.
then the use of it is whether it's residential or short-term,
right.
right? So we're talking more about this.
So I like the
structure.
term residential,
Residential.
and then you define the word residential as a period of time. And maybe that's when you come into your 90-day thing, or something, I don't know,
30.
or you do, well. Anything over 30 days then becomes.
Residential.
Residential.
Or long-term resident, right, long-term rental or residential.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I like the term residential at this point, and, but I could sleep on it and come up with some. Thing wrong with it for sure, but I don't like the words dwelling,
So what would the short term be?
30 days or less,
No, I mean, would it be short term residential?
No.
just short term rental.
Long term rental is. Why don't we just say long term rental or long term short term?
Yeah, that's what.
Forget
Long-term-
residential.
No, but residential, you do have to have,
A residential component.
yeah, you do for the person that's going to live there on a.
So
regular
just
basis.
for the business district, it would be secondary. Worrying about other districts, do we want to worry about them?
I don't think we can, I mean, that's not our, I mean, that's up to the.
But if you have, yeah, but if you have thoughts or opinions on it, we've been collecting them as we go. So if there's something you want to share, it's something that we can put as an aside to continue to work on.
Sure. No, we muddled through the short-term, long-term rental, and it still works if you include the motel, hotel. It works around all the districts. I was wondering if there was an easy solution for the dwelling, the residential one as well.
Yeah, that might not be an easy solution. We have to. do it. It might be, but it might be.
Right.
taking
Yeah, I think
more
it's it's the exact same thing that we've done here.
Yeah.
You have to do that for the other ones, and I think that that's where the not applicable or comes into play,
Leave it blank.
or leave it blank.
Okay. Do you guys have anything else you want to touch on occupancy related? We've hit accessory use, we hit, dwelling units or residential, and we hit nightly rentals or long-term rentals. And then, so if there's anything else specific to those items, we can discuss it and then come back to the next meeting with more business discussion or wherever you guys want to go with it.
Right, and I thought we were short-term or long-term rentals, not
Yes.
nightly rentals.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
Nightly.
Sorry, short term. You
Okay.
like that better? Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
short-term
nightly.
or long-term.
I'm a little confused. Yeah, long term, short term. Is there another category?
There, I think at this point, there will be bed and breakfast, short-term rental, long-term rental, and then motel hotel.
And residential.
And residential.
Okay, that's where I'm confused. Why is there something separate?
So you can have a residence. I could own a home. I'm not renting it long-term. I'm not operating it short-term. But I'm gonna live there and it's gonna
So-
be my residence.
Here's how it is, here's how you go. It's not bringing in an income,
Okay.
Yeah,
right?
It's not a business.
Right.
yes,
All right, so there's
it's your home.
residential means.
It is-
not
it is
bringing in
home.
income, or
But then I say that and now I have to back that up because I guess somebody could rent it as a residential
That'd be long.
Then it'd be
term.
long-term.
for long-term.
Yeah,
So that, I think that's where it comes back to, it should be
owner occupied.
owner occupied. And then I say that as in, if you're letting your whoever live there and you're not charging them, it's still
Right.
owner occupied.
Okay.
You know, it's,
Yep.
you're saying this person is living here, it's not a
Yep,
business.
yep. Oh, there.
but we can verify.
We don't have a rental agreement.
Yeah, you don't have a rental agreement. It's still, it's you. You are
Right,
letting
you're not
somebody live
paying,
there or
you're not
you're
paying
living there.
taxes
Yeah.
other than okay, so it isn't like
A
Mark
business.
says it is not a business.
So it's
It is
owner
not producing a revenue to the owner.
Okay.
I did write down one definition for business.
Lay it on us, because there is one in here. If you look at the last,
Yes.
not last page, but page, Liz did provide some business.
Page 18, is that the one? The definition.
12, 11 and 12.
Yeah, kind of starts on the bottom of page 11. Business means a for-profit or nonprofit entity engaging or offering to engage in a trade, service, a profession, or an activity with the goal of receiving a financial benefit in exchange for the provision of services or goods or other properties. And that's a definition from state statute. And then I think Randy had added this one, the in business or operating a business from the Anchorage Code. That's kind of a start to that conversation.
That one I think is also Webster's dictionary definition.
The state one or Anchorage?
I think the state.
So what was it? I didn't hear a word of that, Liz.
I think it's on page.
It's on page 12.
It starts on 11.
Starts on the top, the bottom of 11.
And it's 12. On this.
Walt should have to sit by the
Means a
teacher.
for-profit or
I'm sorry, I can barely speak.
Starts here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
Then
that that's the
goes
same one that I looked at.
Yeah. And Nicola, you had a definition?
Do. I got mine off the IRS website. The term trade or business generally includes any activity carried on for the production of income from selling goods or performing services.
Very concise.
I like it.
I like the shortness of that.
Yeah, I like that a lot better than the one from, where's it from?
Alaska statute.
Yeah. That one's a lot better. Less words.
And I had written one down before and I could not tell you where I like sourced my words from. A simple definition of business is explained as an organization that provides goods and services to the community in exchange for money with the goal of becoming profitable. Ooh.
We wish. No.
That is the goal.
If you'll send those to us. And then we can share them at the next meeting.
Yes, I'm happy to. What was the next? I've interrupted you when you were about to segue into the next item.
Nope, that would be the next item is to get into a discussion about all of those definitions, commercial recreation, offices, and I don't mean we need to deep dive into them, but just making sure that none of those are applicable outside of the term in business. So if you guys want to do some homework and just, again, I know we went over it as a group, but again, reviewing all of the land uses in the code that would technically fall under as a business and make sure that there's no outliers why they would need to be outside of in business. For instance, anything dealing with marijuana cultivation, marijuana store, marijuana testing would remain outside because of the further regulations that are imposed upon having a business that is related to marijuana. So it remains on its own as a conditional use, and just kind of taking a scope like that specific to the commercial business district and saying, you know, like if you look at commercial recreation, is there a reason why that should be on its own and shouldn't be just blanketly permitted in the commercial business as a business.
And so we go back through and kind of look at all of the different uses, and when we're looking at the definitions that we're trying to come up with for business. And then when we do that, after we do come up with a definition of business is when we're gonna go back through the ones that we're gonna come back to
Yeah.
have further discussion to see how those fit in. as a
Yeah.
group. Oh,
Yeah, so because like lumberyard, that
Right.
could be a business, but it should it be a part of in business, or does it have its own
mhm. Yep,
own process that needs to be looked at separately for the district and not just be in
and if it's
business?
permitted or not.
Exactly.
Got it.
So just following through.
Yeah.
And if you actually want to send those to us, then we can send them out to everybody. Otherwise, we can have it as part of the discussion.
And I think some of the definitions we had in there were home occupation, business personal, business consumer services. So there was kind of a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Wholesale business, retail business.
And so we never really came to something, maybe I just got sidetracked, but as far as what did we come to on accessory structure? Because that, it's as far as, I mean, if you have a big storage area for something on another piece of property for a business that is clearly in business, I think absolutely that should be an okay thing to do.
Right.
That's just my opinion. I'm sure others have other opinions.
So accessory use or structure is permitted across the city. The difference being only actually for commercial business district that an accessory structure without a main building. So it's just building a boat,
Right.
a
So,
boathouse or a
mhm.
a garden or a storage building or a pergola or a greenhouse, standing alone without a main building is currently a conditional use for the district.
Is it conditional or?
Yes.
No.
Currently not
Oh,
permitted.
I think it's not permitted, and I
Sorry,
think
not
we need
permitted. I
to,
was looking at the wrong one.
right, we need to address that because we do have some businesses that are currently doing business within our community that are successful businesses that have that current operation, and I think we need to make sure that we don't
Yes.
do something that would negatively impact them.
That they have a standalone
I
building
think-
with no other buildings.
I asked Heidi about this before and she called it a warehouse. His building.
The one
And,
you're, one you're talking about.
and it's also not permitted currently. So
Well-
either of those we should address, so we can have it as a primary use. But do we want?
That's the
that?
question.
Or
Storage
at least,
building?
I mean, if not primary for, so that you don't get somebody just building just that. Maybe make it
Secondary to
district.
business.
Uh-huh. I mean, I think that maybe there needs to be some clarification there, but it's back to the same thing, that we need to be really careful as a community that we do not in any way negatively impact somebody that is currently in business.
Mhm.
But, I mean, unless they're doing something way wrong,
Yeah.
and so.
So if somebody wants to build a storage unit of any kind downtown, throw up a couple connexes, put a header on it and say this is connected to my other business,
Mhm.
this is a permitted use.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe it is something that needs to be conditional, but I think that we need to get away from not permitted because we currently have that situation and I mean, and it is not being taken advantage of in a negative way.
Right.
So I think we need to support that and we need to make it when we're going through these
Mhm.
things.
Yeah. I'm just asking, not looking at it just for the individual and what's happening right now, but look for the future as well.
Right.
And that.
So
impact.
that maybe that is how it becomes conditional, which I absolutely dislike having anything conditional. So,
Mhm.
it is a discussion,
No, I hear you.
for sure,
Yeah.
and when we're trying to clarify and make things, positive for business owners, I think just need to.
Or do we grandfather the ones that are existing? I mean, we kind of currently have it existing now.
Mhm.
So do we say no, tear it down, or? I mean, we're kind of at the crunch point.
Well, the one thing
guess-
that is a little bit different there is that I buy all of my soil out of there.
Uh-huh.
So they are actually selling stuff out of there.
Uh-huh.
It isn't just, but. I
But
think
it-
that there needs to be some
Does
clarification.
it need a different business license and a different name?
Yeah,
Well,
so, and then not sticking just to that one particular property. I guess then are there limitations surrounding that for if a different property wanted to utilize an accessory use? As the same, like, so I say I have a commercial fishing business and I want to build a boat storage. In commercial business, and that is part of my business. Is that applicable as long as it's part of my business and it's there in commercial business district?
my answer would be yes.
Or if I'm operating a farmer's market and I want to have a garden and, not just picking on fishing, but any of those kind of
Right.
things.
Because you are in business, and
Mhm.
so that, I mean, it might not be the business that everybody wants to see, or
Mhm.
that a group of people want to see, but it is in business and you.
So the only, not the only, but one immediate downside I see, or flag is that while that works for that person in that business at that time, then you run into in the future individuals that buy it and don't necessarily like, the house was built as a duplex and a downstairs rental, upstairs rental, and now they just want to live in it because it was built as a house, or their boat yard is there, so they just want to be able to store a boat in there and they don't want to run it.
Right,
It's
but the
always been-
difference is it was a business prior and it needs to continue to be a business.
And that's where the in business comes
Yeah.
in.
Okay, so now he becomes a wholesaler, wholesale business, it's permitted because you are buying that out of there. And for you, the marine equipment sales, service, repair, construction and storage is
Is
marine
going-
storage is permitted.
Mhm.
So I think
It's
we've
already there.
covered those scenarios,
Okay.
but there will potentially be things that come up.
Mhm.
And if they don't find a spot that fits,
Then that's why they're conditional. Okay.
Okay, I've been mulling over this accessory structure on an unoccupied lot, and then you look back at what an accessory structure is. And it always talks about a main building, so you can't have an accessory structure on an unoccupied lot. Because you need a main building.
So that's why
But if
it's
you get rid of that definition, then.
yeah, that's why it's an accessory structure on a occupied lot without main building is how it's listed in the land use table. So we're saying,
have
But in
keep all
the
these things.
definition, it says you need to have a main building under accessory
that's what
structure.
makes it an accessory structure, but they also have a handful of words that describe what that accessory structure is,
It's
whether it's a
definitely
garage or
water,
pergola or
it's-
garden.
it's an accessory use then, not necessarily an accessory structure.
But the discussion is to get rid of those, right? I'm not, well, not necessarily get rid of them, well, yeah, because they're covered, she's saying they're covered in other definitions. I mean, the two.
Without a,
Without using the exact, the definition accessory structure or accessory use. Those things are, those definitions or those examples that you gave of. Like the warehouse or whatever, those are covered in other definitions.
yeah, so I think we're saying to take away the unoccupied lot one. And then under accessory use or structure for commercial business district, it becomes conditional.
So
Or
Why? The first
No,
one.
because the accessory use, the accessory structure
Oh, because if
is
there's
an
a
accessory
building there,
building,
then that's permitted.
it's moot.
yeah,
So it's only, if there isn't a building.
Yeah,
So that.
and then it has
stay.
to, then
Yeah.
it has to fall into a different category.
Why
the,
do you have to have an accessory, why do you have to have this definition?
You don't, I don't. think
Like,
you
why do we need it?
I don't. think
My
my
you-
understanding is it applies to if you have a main building on an adjoining.
Well, I know what
property.
its intent is, but if we are,
I think it's just if somebody wanted to build a shed, but I guess if it's already in there that it has to have a building, then we would just say you can't have a shed on a lot without
oh,
a
we have
building.
one of those, I think.
Well, your shed is your main building then.
But, and once you
Then you
have
have to
your,
run a
if
business out
it
of
becomes
it.
your main building, then it has to have plumbing,
business.
water and sewer,
Only if you're occupied, yeah.
if you're occupying it.
Only if it's a residence now.
No, if you're
but if
occupying
it's a
it
storage, I could be a
Occupied.
storage.
and be a business.
And that would be a business and you would not have to have water and sewer
You-
for a storage.
I don't think you can be storage in this district.
But you said you can be.
I can't remember.
No, you can't have
Well-
any storage in commercial business.
I propose like
Like-
those lots there on that part of the street, they get out of the commercial business district. Your properties, everything on that, once you turn the corner.
Yeah, but that's not, that's a different group that gets to make those decisions, not us.
That's actually her group.
Yeah.
Oh,
She's your.
You're
planning
part of that
commission
group?
She's your planning commission representative. That is her group.
I think I sent that in to my little thing. So,
Mhm.
okay, good.
I mean, while we're talking about,
but we still, besides that, we still have a couple vacant lots
Mhm.
throughout the commercial business district that
Yeah.
aren't being utilized right now, or that are being used as.
So like for food trucks, could you just pull in there and start business, because they want
I guess-
water and sewer?
Well, no, if they had water and sewer, they could, and there is water and sewer to all those locations. And I think that would be a fantastic.
And that's one that we did talk about and looking at as a definition for a mobile business.
Mhm.
That's a good reminder. Okay, I see the point. Remove accessory structure on an unoccupied lot without a main building. We'll work on the definition for accessory structure overall.
Because it doesn't, yeah, because you can have as many.
Cause Allison's right, it does say it's supposed to have a building, but we'll work on,
Okay.
we'll work on it.
Mhm.
And then I'll make a note also for the mobile business for next meeting.
I do also support the idea of changing commercial business district to central business district. Or taking out the commercial portion of the business district. Verbiage.
Could it just be business district?
Yeah.
Cause it, commercial business district sounds like you're using the same
Commercial.
word twice.
I mean, we have.
It's the business district.
We have a
Commercial.
commercial district, so then to have a commercial and a business, if we're looking at this, we'll probably look at move, so maybe it should be central, but that's a bigger. Changing it to remove commercial,
For this
Yes.
district.
but we'll have to look at how that flows with the rest, cause I have a feeling. Even just from this conversation tonight, that the planning commission is gonna have a lot of homework coming up as a whole across the city.
Yeah, our planning commission members.
But
Yes, there's an open space on the planning commission.
So.
We appreciate your service tremendously.
Okay. Any other last minute notes?
Any public comment?
Randy?
And then, for our next meeting, we pushed this meeting back a week because a lot of people weren't here. Do we want to stick with the 24th or do we want to go to the 31st? For our next meeting. Is there any input on that?
Yeah, I like the report because it's so fresh in your mind and it's
Okay.
not like you're recreating your brain wheel. That's like me, my husband knew this,
So that's
I have no idea.
Next Wednesday?
That would be a week from today.
I don't have anything going on.
So it sounds like there aren't any conflicts with that. So I'll schedule the next one for the 24th.
Okay.
All right.
Adjourn?
Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing else.